EdTech Mondays Africa is supported by the MasterCard Foundation Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning and is part of the Foundation's Young Africa Works programming.
Hello and welcome to yet another edition of EdTech Mondays Africa. I'm Joy Dorindira. On this edition, we're talking systemizing EdTech integration into the curriculum. Education is a sector that is fundamental to all other sectors. Today, digital technologies are imperative for learning. When applied effectively, digital technologies can enhance education quality, accessibility, and affordability. Digital education denotes the application of digital technologies in education and education on how to use these technologies, in essence, the digital literacy and skills. In addition, procuring devices, software, and maintaining digital platforms stretches educational budgets that are already struggling to accommodate widespread technology adoption within the curricula. The extent to which digital technologies are used for teaching and learning and for enhancing specialized ICT has been hampered by the absence of competency framework for students and teachers, the lack of integration of digital literacy, skills, educational technologies localized content into the curriculum, and the limited number of skilled teachers to deliver ICT courses. Yet, there are immense benefits of integrating such technology standards in the continent's education system. In addition, a standardized EdTech framework enhances quality control and positive learning outcomes, ensuring that technology or technological tools genuinely enhance learning rather than disrupt it. This edition of EdTech Mondays Africa seeks action on Recommendation 6 of the 2024 EdTech Conference to systemize EdTech integration by introducing and enforcing clear, context-relevant standards for integration of technology into the educational curriculum. And we're asking, what are the benefits of a systematic, consistent approach to EdTech integration that is adoptable across diverse educational curricula? Our panelists for this edition are Adolf Kinyero, Senior ICT Officer, Tanzania Institute of Education, Tabitha Wairimu Ngugi, who is the Learning Science Manager at iHub Kenya, Natalie Fuljuo, who is the founder and CEO Wonderspaced in Ghana, and Mukundi Lambani, co-founder and CEO Ambani Africa, based out of South Africa. Thank you all for joining us on this edition. And I guess the first question I'm going to pose is to Adolf. Adolf, knowing that you are among all the panelists for sure, coming in from the government side, what is your assessment of the technology in the current curricula in Tanzania? And how exactly do you think the education systems are prepared to adopt this kind of technology in learning system across Tanzania? And maybe you're even sharing your views across the continent.
Here at Tanzania Institute of Education, we've just finished updating our curriculum in 2023, and during the update there was a lot of emphasis on digital literacy, where ICT is integrated across all subjects. And the Tanzania Institute ourselves have platforms like TIE Online Library, which provides ebooks and interactive contents to all the students, which aims at enhancing teaching and learning through technology. The transformation to digital transformation is, I can say it's still on its early stages of implementation, where we have some challenges here and there, some of them being the infrastructure, especially in rural schools, some insufficient devices like computers and tablets in rural areas. In some areas, we are experiencing outage of electricity in schools and a need for more teacher training in schools. For teacher training, at the moment, we have a program whereby we have a teacher continuous development program, which we use the LMS platform for in-service teacher continuous development programs. A way forward is that we are going to be investing in school infrastructure, providing devices to teachers, and expand the programs for teacher continuous professional development nationwide. This, I hope, will strengthen ties digital content development and delivery.
Tabitha, let me come to you. Why exactly do you think it's important, and especially now, to establish clear context-specific standards, for integrating EdTech into educational curricula from your perspective?
The first bit being pedagogical rigor. That sounds complicated, but it's not. With the advancement of technology in education comes people getting content from random places. So that means that then you as a user need to be sure that the content they're using, one, is safe for your child or whoever is interacting with it, but also that it's not conflicting with what's happening in the classroom, then creating confusion. So the first thing there then would be that, for example, if you're looking at KICD, who's our authority in this case, the first question they ask is, how aligned are you to the Kenyan curriculum? Aligned has to do with learning objectives, but also small things like examples you use when you're explaining something. It might seem like a small thing, but context and nuance really affects how kids absorb the content and how much they retain of it. So if you give them, for example, an example that has to do with a pizzeria in Italy, and not the kiosk that they're used to, then they're not going to retain anything. You are talking, but they're not retaining anything. So they check for things that are higher up in terms of alignment, but also ensure that learning actually takes place. So there is also, if you look at all the digital platforms right now that have a KICD approved stamp, every time you see that in your head, what rings is credibility. So it makes you feel like, oh, okay, so someone thinks these guys know what they're doing. So even from a parent's point of view, a teacher's point of view, they feel like you've done the work to make sure that your content is strong and is based on what it should be based on in terms of learning principles. Now, that's the case that has to do with the learning. Now, there's a business case, a very big business case here. So you could do all that work. You have the right tech, your content is good, and then you haven't gone to KICD and they haven't seen it. What happens when you try to sell it to schools is that the first question you're going to be asked when you walk in is, do KICD know you exist? Does the government know what you're doing? If it's a no, they turn you right back. It doesn't matter how good it is. So then it affects your ability to scale significantly. And then that affects your ability to reach as many children as you'd want to reach with a solution, even though it's good, even though you've put a lot of work into it. If it's not gone through the right channels, then you get stuck with it.
Okay, that's interesting. And, based off of what you've said, then it actually does point to the direction of standardization could be, while it's important, it's also a double-edged sword. On one hand, you see that, it creates order, of course, it regulates the system, but then on the other hand, it also creates bureaucracy because of the processes it has to take for content to get approved. So how have standards played a role in ensuring that technology innovations are purposefully and effectively promoting learning outcomes? Because I think this here is also important. Above and beyond, seeing a stamp from the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development, it's really important that the kind of content resonates, just like you said. But how do we make sure that this is happening, especially with the innovators?
For innovators, for them also, you have to think for EdTech especially, they're building lean, they have very small teams. And so they might not have the expertise they need to bring in to ensure that they are aligned to the curriculum and that they're doing all those things. So sometimes it's not that they don't want to, it's just that if they have to pick between building the thing and taking it to schools versus paying KICD, which is not cheap, one. And then, so the KICD process, which is the work that we've done with the foundation now, is try to demystify it. It sounds so hard that a lot of them don't even know where to start or if they want to start in the first place. So with our first stakeholder engagement that we did with the foundation was bringing in all the innovators in the MasterCard Foundation EdTech Fellowship Program. We brought all of them in and brought KICD into the room, and then they really went head to head. I actually felt bad for my KICD guys because the innovators were angry. They felt like they're gatekeeping. They felt like they're trying to keep them out. NKCD was saying, listen, no, we are not against you. We actually now are pro-technology, but you guys are not coming to us. It's a joke that we make nowadays that innovators prefer to ask for forgiveness and not permissions. So they run to the schools, and then if they're caught, they're like, okay, let's talk.
Let's also hear from, the innovators here, because, Mukundi and Natalie, there's a disconnect, of course, or a perceived disconnect between the EdTech content developers and the content regulators here. But what are the issues that we're looking at? Is there a misunderstanding, maybe from your perspective, knowing that you are putting in the work, but then you don't seem to be getting headway when it comes to localizing your content? How do you suggest we resolve some of these issues?
Prior to joining the EdTech Fellowship, I can admit that we were creating a bit of a bubble. So we were, we're going ahead. We have our vision. I have an educational background. So moving ahead, So being in the EdTech Fellowship just gave us a chance to really assess what we were doing. Now, I had a background in international education. So a lot of my teaching experience was in schools that do the Cambridge or the IB curriculum. And so that's another difficulty that we have in Ghana. We have a very diverse landscape for education, and different schools use multiple curricula. Okay, and some schools may actually even use both the Cambridge and both the GES curriculum. And so my background was more in on the international side. So you are trying to think about how do you create a platform where you can curate the material so that you don't miss out on any school. Right, the relevance, you want to be relevant for GES. You also want to be relevant for the likes of the IB and Cambridge schools. So that's definitely a challenge that we encountered in how to design, how to organize, and how to curate our platform and in general. So I have to say that being part of the EdTech Fellowship was essential for us in how we align our content. It also gave us a great chance to learn about the national policies, the GES system. So we would have meetings where, all the EdTech innovators are in the room, NGOs, teachers, the GES personnel. It was extremely educative. And I'm glad that we had the opportunity to do that because we had open dialogue. And I think that's one thing that we can agree on, that the open dialogue really makes a difference. Also being informed about their plans, the direction of policy, their excitement about tech, because sometimes you may think that, we are against each other, but we're not against each other. We should be collaborating, right? So I think for me, being part of the fellowship was essential and actually crucial in how we design and align our platform to national priorities.
Mukundi, I want to hear your perspective. This is the Ghana perspective. What is the South Africa perspective?
I mean, I first have to echo some of Natalie's sentiments around how we develop as EdTechs. And oftentimes we design outside the curriculum. And so even when we're designing something that's useful, I think for governments and for those who are maintaining the curriculum, there's certain boxes that they need in order for us to tick sort of formal adoption. And we don't always follow those standards. So I think definitely an issue is from us and the way in which we're designing our tools. But I think as developers, we also oftentimes move faster than regulators. So I think Adolf mentioned how, in 2023, they were implementing their new curriculum. And I imagine that took time to develop. And we are on the ground thinking about developments that are happening. And so we're often moving at a pace that's a lot faster than the actual curriculum. Which I think a disconnect tends to happen there. But I think because as Ambani in particular, we focus on mother tongue learning, we have an additional challenge of kind of language and content standards and that not always being accessible or always being clear. And so as Natalie said, we find ourselves sometimes developing in a bubble or sometimes developing ahead of policy and ahead of curriculum. But I think some of the things that we can do as a solution is definitely engagement. So having spaces, and I think the conference was one, but really having regular engagement forums where as EdTech creators, we can actually access curriculum bodies or assessment boards. I think even shared innovation, sandboxes or spaces where we can test out solutions actually within those regulatory boundaries so that we're doing that as we're developing and not developing separately, then presenting a solution. And then I think even involving spaces like teacher training, colleges or institutions. So spaces where we can continuously test so that by the time we're implementing, we already have buy-in and there's a sense that this was co-created with the educators.
That's interesting. And so just maybe to follow up from the two of you, do you think that maybe sometimes you're moving faster than the government's decision process? Because maybe that there could also be the challenge. And how do you suggest that we work around this challenge?
I look at here in South Africa, the coding and robotics curriculum, a lot of that is being implemented now, whereas a lot of edtechs were doing that before. I mean, that's something that we had already introduced on our platform, and we're having to go back and say, this is something we were doing, but now there's an actual curriculum, and we have to say, do we align with this? How do we work what we've done to make sure that it now aligns with curriculum. So definitely there's a sense that, and it's understandable that that sort of education works differently. And as a smaller edtech startup, you're a lot more nimble. So it is easy to move faster. But that's definitely a challenge. And I'm not sure outside of us doing what we're doing and coming back and saying, once the curriculum is ready, it'll meet us along the way. Outside of that, I don't know if what we can do.
I think outside of speed as well is pedagogy as well. I think for us at WonderSpace, for example, we're big on interdisciplinary learning. The national curriculum, it is a goal, but at the moment it's still in its individual strands. It's still very, perhaps one course is disconnected from the other. So in an attempt to push ahead or maybe pioneer a vision, yes, it can seem like you're moving ahead.
Adolf, you've heard from the EdTech companies, and I'm sure you do have some in Tanzania. In fact, we have quite a couple. I think we have 22 EdTech companies so far that we are working with or supporting in Tanzania at the moment. How can content developers like Mukundi and Natalie and the rest of them that are in Tanzania best meet the regulators' requirements regarding these innovations into local curriculum? Because according to the innovators, the government is slowing them down. While they're creating solutions for the young people, the government is not making up its mind on how exactly they should incorporate some of these learning material or content into the curricula. So what do you have to say to that, Adolf?
There are a lot of them here in Tanzania. And once they've developed a great team, we do invite them to come and do a presentation to the management. And once the solution is found that it's good and it can help our kids in school, we step into signing an MOU between Tanzania Institute of Education and the startup company so that they can start developing that solution to scale it out to nationwide.
What is your assessment of the ones that have been approved? What kind of content are they developing that aligns to the Tanzania curricula?
We have one tech company which develops some a platform whereby students can interact with an AI kind of system, whereby they can ask questions, they get answers, they can assess themselves, learn and assess themselves with the system.
Tabitha, I see you nodding in agreement, but is this what you encourage the innovators, the EdTech fellows in this case, to do as well?
The people who produce the most content for the government cloud right now are part of the fellowship, both of them, which is great, which I guess is also a testament to the work that we are doing with the foundation in education. But then that brings the issue of not everyone can get into the system and not everyone is. So what they're doing, all of them is what CBC, which is now turning to CBE, all of them are doing the full grade 1 to 10, trying to offer content. The problem with that though is just the other day they rationalized the curriculum and everyone who thought they were done started from square one. Now, producing content is extremely expensive. So that's now becoming costs that they don't know if they want to keep. The ROI isn't looking good because the government buys your content and then the same government then goes and changes the curriculum and then you have to go through the curation process again. And so yes, we do encourage them to get the curation process done by KICD. Now that we are doing the work with them, then we've created a tool, what you call a toolkit to the foundation, which is it's basically where do you start? What are the things that they'd be flagging if they were checking? Now, if you don't have this, what usually happens is, say you have a storybook, give it to them, and then they give you a 50-page report on all the things you're doing wrong that you need to then revise. And then usually we've had people in the cohort say it took them 2 years to even just get from you can imagine 2 years of waiting for a report. And then by the time it comes, the curriculum has changed and you paid money to the same government.
I'm sure there's some advice that you do give some of these fellows. What are you telling them, in terms of how best they can meet the requirements that the government is asking of them, the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development and other regulators as well? What kind of advice are you giving them? Because maybe sometimes they're developing solutions that maybe are 5 years ahead of time. Is the government able to assess and say, we don't need that now, but we're going to need it in the near future? Like, what is that interaction you're having with the government at the moment?
So unfortunately, they're not saying you're going to need it in the near future. They just stop at the we don't need it now, which can be very discouraging for innovators. So what we do tell them is, unfortunately, because we have growth stage startups at this point, all of them have an MVP and they're in the market. So it's now to see where are you versus where you should be. And then because we have the upper hand where the foundation and iHub is working with KICD, then they are able to understand what they need to fix within the product faster. Now, that's a benefit from being in the program. Now, if you weren't in the program and you're trying to do the same thing, I would say go to KICD, get to sit down with the curators, have them look at just one. That's the other thing they all try to do, is if you have grade 1 to 10 content, they want to submit grade 1 to 10 content for curation. That's going to take a year for them to even assign someone to check. So usually, because the things they flag are going to be repetitive within the content, just have them look at a small bit and then figure out what you're doing wrong, and then now correct the entire bit before you give it for curation. So there are small tips and tricks here and there.
Adolf, let me just come back to you based off of what Tabitha has said, the fact that this government process takes some time, and maybe these EdTech content developers are running businesses, for-profit businesses. So they have to strike a balance between waiting on the government to make up its time, and then at the same time, being able to make sure that they're paying their teams as well, or meeting their team's demands. How are you factoring in those aspects in the decision-making process?
Quality assurance for the content that flows to the kids in schools. We have to go through the contents that are created by startup companies to see if the contents are suitable for the kids. Once they are suitable, we approve them to be used in the schools. That's only when the company can start now, whether it's selling the solution to schools or partnering with TIE to distribute the solution
to the schools. So give or take, how long does this process take?
I can say from the moment they come and knock our door to reaching a place where now the solution can be distributed. It takes not less than 8 months, and it can go to 1.5 years, depending on the kind of solution that is being evaluated.
So that means the systemization could take longer, depending on the learning solution that we are looking at. I don't know how long it takes, Natalie and Mukundi in South Africa and in Ghana. Maybe you could let us in, because I'm sure you've tried to pitch these things to the government regulators, content regulators in this case. How long has it taken? What kind of feedback have you gotten? And Mukundi, if I might start with you, you recently signed an MOU as well with the Ministry of Education. What did you have to get right prior to them even agreeing to this memorandum of understanding?
So it certainly takes patience and persistence and understanding that internal government processes take time. But I think one of the important aspects was actually just aligning. So locally we use the CAPS curriculum and really being very clear about how we align with it. So essentially we had a platform that had different resources available in different languages, but we actually had to get to the point where we curate it according to the weekly teaching plans in the curriculum. So I think Tabitha described it so well in saying there might be, you might think you're ahead of the curriculum, but how do you actually show that we are covering what exists in the curriculum, and anyone who needs anything over and above and beyond this is also able to access that? So we had to be quite clear to say, this is the point in the curriculum, and this is where we match that exactly. And then over and above that, we also have this. I think impact as well. So I think Adolf put it so well in saying, while they're assessing, they need to determine, is this actually good for the learners? And so we had to do our own impact study initially to sort of say, we've tested this, with a small test group or within a classroom, within a rural context. These are the results that we found. And so I think that helps to sort of show that there is some sort of legitimacy to what it is we're presenting.
Natalie, what are your thoughts around the processes? How long has it taken for you to, if at all, you've had any partnerships with the government? What does that process look like? And which are the bits that you'd like to say the government can continue doing, but then maybe there are bits you would like to say, can the government stop doing this? What are those areas?
The approach that we've been using for now is we've been going into some of the schools to get feedback from teachers and from principals, from other educators, and the feedback has been fantastic. And so we're building a case. I think when you build a case, and teachers are requesting this is excellent, this is what we need. So for example, we create multimodal content. We use animation, live hosts to make highly engaging content for different materials. So for example, our History Corner show or History Corner series picks different legends in Ghana and uses animation to make the learning process very, very exciting. Because the current curriculum lacks hands-on learning materials or digital materials, there's great interest around it. So I believe that as the interest builds and as teachers request this more and more, it will either be we approach or we are contacted, or or we are then approached instead of having to pitch.
Right.
So yeah, we are building a case. The feedback has been great. We also have to do the work of building the content from scratch. An animation that takes a long time. So does the full production. So we are making sure that we are prepared when they do come. When they do approach us, that we do have a library of content that the schools are ready to use. At the moment, it's an MVP stage. We do have content that the schools really like, but I think we can do a little more work to build our content. And so I think that once our content grows and the interest grows, we'll definitely be sought after.
What would you like the government to start doing, to continue doing, and to stop doing? Maybe that way we're able to get some guidance into what exactly is not right where government regulation is concerned.
I think there's a real interest in digital technology at the moment. It's kind of like a keyword that's being used in every meeting, in every conference, right? So I think they should continue with that excitement. They should continue with that vision because then there's room to work together. What should they stop doing? I think just maybe more clarity on what is required to be selected. And also the finances being made available when they do go with a company.
Mukundi, what is your start, stop, continue recommendation?
I think START is definitely more, as I mentioned, a space for collaborating and testing together with government. So how do we make that space actually exist and say, if you've got an EdTech something, come, let's test it out. Let's see how it goes in a way that's efficient and that allows us to continue business. I think that START. I think continue is probably where I'll agree with Natalie in something like the fellowship and the ways in which, because we were able to sign the MOU through our involvement in the fellowship. And so I think there where there's almost a mediator or a middleman between ourselves and government, and they're able to facilitate those conversations, I think we should certainly continue that. I think stop is probably making not having very clear processes. So I think we need to sort of know, if we're engaging with government, this is what it takes. This is the timelines it looks like. This is the different steps and the processes that you need to go through. This is where it stops. This is where it ends. I think at the moment, for us at least, it's been an unclear process.
What is your start, stop, continue to the content developers as well from a government perspective? Because maybe you think they're developing irrelevant content. What exactly is it you'd like to encourage them to do?
The content developers, they can develop an amazing system, but aligning it with the content that we develop becomes so difficult. So I think they need to develop a good platform, but taking into consideration that it will be able to receive the contents that are developed by TIE, and that makes it easy to evaluate the system itself. Because if they try and put some content that are developed by themselves, it takes us longer to evaluate the system, because we as TIE will need now to evaluate the content first, then the workability of the solution itself. So they have to make a system which is easily adaptable with the content that are already developed by TIE.
And even as we do this, from the Tech Hub's perspective, Tabitha, I'm sure there are also areas that you would like to recommend on both the government side, because you interact with the regulator and you also interact with the content developers. What are those start, stop, continue situations looking like from both sides of the divide?
Start is literally start somewhere. A lot of them, because of how they both said they don't know where to start, they end up never doing it, right? And like you said, she said Natalie is waiting for them to come to her. It's literally, they all just are like, I hope these guys, good luck to everyone. I hope they find me. So that would be that would be my start for them, is start somewhere, take just one grade, one piece of content to them, to the regulatory body, and let them see what you're doing and get feedback from that, and then make an informed decision on whether you feel like this is worth pursuing for the rest of your content or not. Continue for me would be keep innovating for the future. I know that the regulation can stifle innovation, and I hope that doesn't happen. And you guys are very intent on ensuring that you're building for the future of work and not the kids that we have now. And I think that should keep going, because that informs policy, and that's how it should be. Policy should be informed by the work that's going on within the ecosystem, and I hope you guys keep building for that. So that's my continue. And then finally, my stop would be silos. And I think only as a product of this program have we seen EdTech innovators even collaborate and come together and even speak to government. I feel like it's unfortunate that for them to sit in the same space with government, the foundation and the tech hubs have to be in the conversation. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. So I think they also need to stop building in silos, talk to each other. If someone else is creating content in South Africa and Ghana, you guys are basically doing the same thing, just for different audiences. Talk to each other, figure out, like she seems to have cracked it. I mean, Mukudin seems to have cracked something, something about how to navigate this. And so Natalie could speak to you and benefit from your knowledge on how not to waste time on the things you feel like you wasted time on. So that would be my stop for me. Stop building in silos. I feel like that's for the EdTech ecosystem. Regulators, those ones I feel like we need a whole day for. But my stop for them is stop seeing the innovators as a bad thing, stop seeing them as a threat to education, and start seeing them as the enabler that they are. I feel like government still is very, very suspicious of technology in education, and they ask very many questions, and that's great on the one hand that they're protecting the kids, but that also on the other hand stifles the growth of EdTech startups and innovation. So I'd say stop giving so many barriers to entry that it becomes impossible. continue setting standards though. I feel like even while you're trying to get your, here it's called curation, the process of getting approved, I feel like it forces them to document everything they do. And sometimes they inadvertently find a lot of gaps within the things that they're teaching. And they're like, oh, okay, so we covered this here, but we could have done this here. So the documentation in itself, even as it's rigorous and tenuous, does have good parts about it where they get to just make sure that the Q&A is solid. So keep doing that. I like the standards bit that the government provides. Stop gatekeeping. Stop gatekeeping. Yeah.
In all of this, context, we're actually living out an important stakeholder, who is the teacher. And I think that this teacher empowerment as well is very important. And so the question to all of us is, how can teacher training programs be improved to ensure that educators feel confident, using the technologies that are in the classrooms?
So certainly in working with the educators as we're developing the solution has been a lesson and something we're continuously trying to do. And then I think moving away from, once we have our solution, moving away from sort of once-off workshops and thinking about how we create communities or how we can create ongoing professional development. So I think we found that things like offline support, so having WhatsApp-based communities where educators are engaging with each other as they're using the tool and sort of saying, this is what I've done in my classroom, or this is what I'm looking for. Can anyone support? But I think finding ways of moving away from just a once-off kind of, this is the solution, you went through the workshop to use it, that's it. But saying, how do we create an ongoing community a perspective or a way of doing things? And then I think secondly, obviously from us, is always being a language inclusive in our tools. So even for the educators, how are we introducing the platform to them in a language that they understand best? And what are we doing inside the platform to make sure that even the teachers are able to navigate in their mother tongue?
All right. So just give me a practical example. How are you doing this for the teachers? Like, are you going to a certain province and saying, this province has a dominance of, say, Zulu, right? And so you incorporate the Zulu language lessons for those particular teachers. How is it going?
So I think a good example is some of the work we did actually in isiZulu in KwaZulu-Natal, in an area called Bergville, which is a rural area, and we're working with ECD educators, and there obviously the workshop itself was done in isiZulu, as much as possible, going through the different lesson plans and the different things that we had set up through that process was done completely in their mother tongue. And then obviously our resources are also in their mother tongue as well. So all of the books, all of the posters, all of the physical resources that they're getting are in both theirs and the mother tongue of the learners. But I think the best example with the educators, even in the group, the facilitator we had on the WhatsApp group was someone who spoke their language and they were able to interact. So it wasn't necessarily that conversations were led by us, but they were led by them as the educators and the facilitators, and it was continuous, ongoing conversations on the WhatsApp group that were happening in their mother tongue.
I agree with Mukundi in empowering and equipping the teachers. So what we realized going into the schools, the local schools, was that there was no equipment to use. So we had to quickly brainstorm what we were going to do. And so how we introduced our content at a large scale was we took in projectors. Now, I think they have an amazing tool because they have an offline quiz taking tool. So we didn't have to buy tablets for every child. So by going in and demonstrating with just a projector and a laptop, we show teachers that this is all you need to show our content and also have your whole class engage in a quiz without requesting a tablet for every single student. So I think it just even starts with equipping each classroom with some technology. At the moment, what we've observed, at least from the 80 schools we went into, was that there is no tech. So there's nothing to start with. And so there's a cry and an eagerness for the teachers. We really want this. We want these tools. We will use it. It will help us. What you did in here was great. So yeah, just I think it just even starting with infrastructure and also not making it a one-time workshop or a one-time visit, but this continuous teacher training, this continuous community building, and just continuous access to the tools they need and not locking it up in the maybe principal's office, or sometimes there may be tools or there may be tech on the premises, but it is very guarded. And so even the process with which you would, request to use a projector, you would just decide, what, I'll just use a blackboard. And in that case, you can't then incorporate the EdTech into the classroom. So making the tech available for the teachers, they are eager. And so I think we should empower and equip them.
Adolf, I'm coming to you now because, you're the people who decide how many laptops go to how many schools across the country. How is this working from a teacher's perspective, where technology in education is concerned?
After the census, which was held in 2022, the laptops that were used by the census were distributed to all the teachers across the country. So they had the laptops, but it was observed that they were so reluctant to use the devices. And when we updated our curriculum in 2023, we were supposed to train all the teachers on the new curriculum. We used the training as an enforcement mechanism for the teachers to use the devices. So at the headquarters at TIE, we have an AI smart classroom. So a facilitator sitting at the headquarters was facilitating to the teachers across the country in zones, like 3 regions at once. And we kept going until the whole country was covered. So the TCPD that I talked to earlier was used to deliver the content to the teachers. And in the TCPD system itself, we added a report portal where you can see how many people are accessing the system, which type of content they are accessing, how many are males, how many are females, and what type of contents are accessed the most, and things like that. So we observed a positive impact on the exercise, and that system has only primary school contents. So based on the statistics that were observed, we managed to obtain the data that can help us to make an informed decision. And now we'll go for secondary school contents. I think that will start this next financial year, or maybe early next year. We'll start having some secondary school contents on the same platform.
And as we bring this conversation to a close, maybe I would like to get a one-sentence conclusion on how best you think we can systemize EdTech into the curricula. Tabitha, let me start with you on this one.
I'd like for the innovators to build with the end in mind. A lot of times they build tech that, like they say, is not compatible with what's going on in the classroom. So whether that means offline capabilities, building for low internet, I'd say for you to be able to systemize that, then the product also needs to be built for that same ecosystem. So build with the users in mind.
Natalie, what would it be for you?
I think it's the provision of infrastructure so that they can even begin to use our products.
Great. Infrastructure. Mukundi.
Collaboration, seeing each other as partners, all working towards the same goal.
Collaboration. Seeing each other as partners, working towards the same goal. And Adolf, what is it for you? What would you like to see before we can systemize EdTech into the curricula?
I think on the government side, they need to push so hard to have the infrastructure in place. And for the EdTech, I think they need to look at the option of having their platforms work offline, because the infrastructure will be built, but there will always be a place where something is missing. So we need to get the platform that can also work offline.
That's very critical, especially for schools that are far out of, the internet access areas. It's very important that these solutions work both off and online as well. And I think that's pretty much how we've come to the end of this conversation. I mean, collaboration, because seeing each other as partners, working towards the same goal, and also getting the infrastructure fixed, just to make sure that everything is working. But to the EdTech innovators, making sure that your solutions can cover both online and offline usage. And I believe developing with the end in mind, or designing with the end in mind, I think that's very critical as well, as we try to systemize EdTech integration into the curriculum. And I think with that, thank you so much all for joining us on this edition. It was an absolute pleasure. My name is Joy Doreen Bira. Until the next one, bye-bye for now.
EdTech Mondays Africa is supported by the MasterCard Foundation Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning and is part of the Foundation's Young Africa Works programming.